Hi everyone, my name's Sheehan and this Values Behaviours video is on irrational fear. Now fear is normal, fear is something that keeps us safe, but the problem is when fear starts to take over and I end up thinking about things in a more catastrophic way than they actually are, and that's when I know I've crossed into irrational fear. Irrational fear is a horrible place to be because I've found that when I cross the line from just normal things that I should be concerned about and through fear into irrational fear, then that's where my thoughts stay and I start to catastrophize. Things are going on in my head. I'm seeing the situation not for what it is, but for what my fears have told me it could possibly be. And that's quite an extreme thing. So irrational fears are actually of something that have had a great consequence on my life. One of the things that I didn't realise I was doing this at the time. It's just I started to isolate. My life got smaller and smaller, and I stayed home and didn't go out and didn't have hobbies, and my social circle diminished. And all of a sudden, it was like I didn't have a life. And the only way that I could see to get out of it was to actually get back out there and start doing things. And the irrational fear was the bit that was really difficult to work through. I won't say overcome because I haven't overcome it yet. It still comes in and I still get the thoughts. I still start to catastrophize when things happen. But I know that it's just an irrational fear. And I have to tell myself that actively. Something comes up and I sit there and I say, I tell myself, this is just an irrational fear. My fears are irrational. And that helps bring me back to reality. And one of the issues, or one of the consequences, I should say, of isolating, going to irrational fear, my life diminishes, I isolate, is that I never actually learn to participate properly in life. I go and hide away and don't come out and make sure I pay my bills, but nowadays everything's electronic, so I can just do it online. I don't actually have to go and face someone. And that led me to realise that the only way out of that, the only way to get through that was to go out and do something, get a hobby and participate and be part of something, take on a little bit of responsibility and ownership of what I was doing, just so that I could work through that fear. It's like I'd finish work, I'd go home, I'd want to stay there. There's time to come and go and do my hobby. I was doing yoga at one stage, and I'd have to work through the fear again to go, just to get out of the house, just to get out of the door, to go and do the thing that I wanted to do. And that's part of the challenge, is convincing myself that this fear that I've got is just irrational. Participating in something or taking on responsibility or having ownership, these are the values that I want to grow in my life, and the only way to do that is through practice. And so when the top level behaviour of wanting to isolate or wanting to avoid something pops up, then I've got to look at it, through my values and say, well, that's not me taking responsibility for my life. That's not me owning something. That's these old behaviours, these things that I want to avoid. These old behaviours are the things that I want to work through so that they don't affect my life anymore. Because right down, underneath the values, underneath behaviours, underneath the values, right down in there is the way that, that really deep-seated feeling about the way I feel about myself. And, that's something, if I understand what that is, if I understand how I'm feeling about something, if I understand my behaviours, then I can change them. If I'm aware of them, I can change them. And that's one of the key things to values behaviours, is about being a change agent in my life. I don't want to live like that. I don't want to live isolated from everybody. I want to be able to think, the gym, I'm going to the gym and I want to look forward to that, as opposed to going through that feeling of dread. It's like, oh God, I've got to go out. Those kinds of thoughts that come up constantly. And work through that, so that when something is happening, I think, oh great, look forward to it, as opposed to look at it with dread, look at it with this need to overcome something. And so in that way, irrational fear, when I identified that my fear largely was irrational, it helped me to realise that this sense of dread, this sense of having to overcome something, this sense of having to work through it, was just a figment of my imagination. It's like I invented this. I decided that this was the way my life was going to be, and the good thing about that is that I can change that. But it takes time, it takes practice, and it takes work, and it takes doing the opposite. Instead of isolating, I've got to go out more. I've got to be in public. If there's somebody there and there's an opportunity for a little bit of small talk, then I've got to engage in that. And that's the only way that I can see that I can work through this. So my irrational fears have had some catastrophic consequences in my life. But the good news is that I recognise that they're irrational, and I can work through them, and I can change them. And that's a little bit on values behaviours about irrational fear.